My name is Jesse Smith, and today I'm going to walk you through how I do a sketch from beginning to end before I start the tattooing process. I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to draw today. I call this free associative drawing. Basically, I just kind of start drawing and trying to figure out how the shapes are going to fit on the body, and then I just go from there. Today we're going to be doing some freehand drawing on Chris. Typically what I try to do when I'm drawing on people is just try to figure out where my big shapes are going to be. So on a forearm, typically up in the upper part of the forearm here, I just draw a big old circle there, knowing that that's kind of the space. A lot of times when I'm working with a client, I'll just ask them, hey, you good with this size here? And then obviously I want to kind of bring some stuff off here as well. Anything that comes around the edges, a lot of times I try to make sure it's not super important. Another thing I attempt to do specifically when I'm working on the side of the arm here is I always try to break this plane right here. A lot of people, they draw right to here, and then, or they put a stencil on here, and a lot of the other artists, they'll put their design there, and then you've got this weird shape here, and then of course nobody wants to tattoo the elbow and the ditch. So you end up with this weird kind of ring around the arm, and then, if they do the fun stuff first, you've got your weird little shape there. So a lot of times what I'll do is to try to break that plane. So whatever I end up doing here, I'll kind of bring something up around here, or if I end up working here, I try to bring something through here so it doesn't look like someone just placed two sticker tattoos here and here. And kind of the same thing here. If I get the opportunity, if I was gonna do some ears or something, I would bring them up around here. Always trying to figure out a way to not make it look like you're just placing it in the coolest, biggest piece of skin that you have. So, all right. And then I also try to establish, where the center line is. Across here. And of course, I always want to do big googly eyes on everything. So I'll just draw some big old eyes here.
Do your clients come to you with an idea, or you just kind of give them whatever?
Yeah, a lot of the times the clients will come with an idea. But I've got a good group of people that just say, hey, I love what you do whatever you want. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just have them find a bunch of tattoos and stuff that I've done in the past and say, oh, I really like this. And I just say, hey, which of these tattoos would you be cool with having on you? And that way it gives me kind of a feel for what they want. The other thing I try to do is figure out their tolerance for kind of cute versus evil, because I feel like my stuff kind of rides that edge between cute and evil. So I'll say, okay, if you were going to give a percentage of how much of this was cute versus how much was evil, what would it be? And someone will be like, I want 100% evil, or I want 60% evil and 40% cute. And that just kind of gives me an idea of what they want, what type of artwork they want to represent them. Because everybody's got their different thresholds. Some people think they're evil, but I always try to squeeze a little bit of cuteness in there. And then some people think they're really cute, but they got a little bit of evil in there. And then of course that dictates the shape of the eyes, that dictates the size of the eyes, the size of the teeth. Typically something that's more cute will have more rounded edges, something that's more evil will have more spiky edges. Something that's cute will have big eyes and little mouth, whereas something that's evil could have smaller eyes and a bigger mouth. So just trying to figure out what those proportions are.
What are you drawing now?
I don't know. I'm just, kind of just putting a base down and just seeing what comes out. Probably gonna be something around like a rabbit or a mouse or something. But then also I feel that I draw kind of the same thing. If I feel that I'm drawing the same thing over and over and over, I try to figure out a way to twist it up a little bit. What were you gonna ask?
Do you ever draw on the iPad, or is it pretty much always freehand?
I draw on the iPad for stuff that I want to do, or stuff that's more personal, or any sort of projects outside of tattooing. But I do a lot of drawing on the iPad, just more. Not for tattooing. Sometimes every once in a while, if it's something where someone's like, can you draw, I don't know, something that I just haven't drawn, like a boba tea samurai, then what I would do is I would get some reference of boba teas and samurais and all that stuff, and I would kind of maybe do some sketches for compositional purposes prior to tattooing them. But it's very rare. Most of the time I just go straight to the skin.
How long does this process typically take you?
You know, it depends on the design, but usually I can get something pretty nice down within a half hour, 45 minutes. But obviously if I'm doing like a full sleeve or a full torso or something like that, it'll take a lot longer. But I probably would have something worth looking at within the next, I'd say half hour or so. Maybe. Depends on where my head's at too. Sometimes stuff just flies out of my head, and then other times I end up drawing something like 50 times and I only end up keeping one piece of it. You know, and that's what I always tell all my clients. I'm like, look, if I draw something you don't like, just let me know and I'll just keep on drawing until you're happy. And I have never had a time where I was drawing on someone where it wasn't something that I could get into that day. So sometimes there might be something where, like, say, you know, I'm drawing a character or something like that, and I'm just not happy with the way the hand is looking or another element within the piece. Well, then I'll just outline the parts that I'm happy with, start tattooing those, and then next time I come in with a fresh brain and start, you know, redrawing that hand. Or I might go to my iPad and start doing some stuff to just try to, like, you know, get it where my mind can understand which angles I'm gonna go with these things. Yeah, I think the hard thing to do when drawing on people is, I feel like, oh, just drawing in general, I feel like everybody's automatic instinct is to try to find that comfort zone of, you know, drawing your eyes the same exact way and drawing everything the same proportions and stuff. So I feel like I always try to tell everybody to make sure when they're drawing with intention. And I think that intention should be to try to explore different places within your art, you know, different noses, different mouths, different eyes, different compositions, you know, trying always to figure out different solutions to problems. And of course that'll build up your visual vocabulary, which of course will, you know, increase the amount of variabilities between your artwork. What do you think? Yeah?
Pretty sick.
All right, so I got a base down, typically going with the lightest color just to kind of get the gist of it down here. And what I'll do now is I'll go in with a little bit darker color. Typically I'll have like 4-ish layers. It depends on how confident I'm feeling and where things are going. But yeah, we're gonna go in with the second value now. Probably going with a third. By the third value, I've pretty much got it all down, but I'm just kind of looking for all those little extra tweaks. And then of course, once I'm tattooing, I'll actually get in there and start tweaking some stuff off of that as well. And I probably should get better about understanding which one of these markers is darker or lighter than others, but I still haven't gotten it. I'd love to come out with a set of markers where it was just like values and not so much the colors, because the colors I feel like kind of throw you off.
Do you look at references when you're tattooing, or is it just all off the dome?
Yeah, I use references a lot actually, but what I try to do is I try not to lean on them too much. I found that when I was in art school, they push reference like crazy. And so we would sit there and we would be, you know, drawing a hand or whatever, and you're just sitting there looking at this reference. And I'd used reference for about 4 years while I was in art school, or probably more than that. I think I was in art school for 5 years. But I'd use reference the whole time, and then when I got out of art school, I could not draw out of my head. And prior to art school, I could, but I was just so used to using that part of my brain. I just feel like it comes from 2 different parts of your brain. And so what I did is I forced myself not to use reference, which was really, really hard at that particular point in time. I was just like, man, you know, really trying to draw everything out of my head. And so now that I'm comfortable drawing out of my head, there's a lot of toggling between the two. So sometimes I'll do reference for, you know, maybe proportions or whatever, but a lot of times reference is more for, you know, to get light sources, because it's difficult to memorize all the light sources that are possible when something's hitting a form. Or colors, sometimes I use reference for colors, but yeah, I always try to get some reference. It also is good for trying to bend your brain in a different direction, because like I was saying earlier, if you just draw out of your head all the time, you find that you just start finding these like little spaces that you get stuck in, where you're just like drawing the same thing over and over and over again. So
you were to tattoo this, how would you find a reference to work off of?
Well, I mean, being that we don't really have anywhere that we're specifically going with it, and I'm just drawing it, you know, kind of, this is like what I call free associative drawing. So I'm just drawing and kind of seeing what comes out. You know, it's not as intentional as if someone came in and was like, hey, I want a, you know, monkey riding a pig. You know, it's like, okay, well, I want to understand exactly what a pig looks like and exactly what a monkey looks like. I also like to see, you know, how maybe other artists have solved that problem. You know, whether it's what the body position of a monkey on top of anything, whether it's a horse or whatever. I'll use that as a reference for compositional purposes. So yeah, with something like this, it's more like free associative. I just kind of just roll with it and see what happens.
So you use a reference when you're drawing or tattooing or both?
I would say both. Yeah, mostly the drawing. I mean, usually after I'm done drawing it, I kind of already have been looking at the reference enough to kind of absorb it. You know, there's just this balance of trying to look at reference enough to get your brain thinking different, and then to understand the basic concept of what you're trying to do, but not looking at it so much that it looks too much like the reference, you know. It's my buddy Nick Mitchell, he does caricatures all the time, and I always think that's pretty amazing because he's like drawing a cartoon version or a real tweaked out version of the person or animal or whatever that he's looking at. And whenever I look at stuff, I find that I try to copy it too much. Like my brain has difficulty shutting off the fact that I'm looking at an image. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I call it like priming your brain, is I'll sit there and let's say I'm drawing like a bat. Well, I'll sit there, I'll draw real quickly, not trying to be perfect or anything, just draw real quickly a bunch of bats that I'm looking at photos, just to memorize like maybe how its arm works, how the, you know, what's involved with the character. And then I'll put it all away and then I'll just start drawing, you know? So it's like the best way for me to memorize what something looks like is to draw it. I mean, you know, I would say that it would be a bit pretentious of me to say that. You know, I think that I've seen tattoo artists who didn't know how to draw at all when they got in the tattoo industry, and then tattooing is what led them to draw more. And then, you know, they end up being really amazing artists. So I'm not, I don't know. I think everybody's journey is, not everybody's journey has to be the same. I'm more interested in people who are, you know, just have a passion for art to be in the industry than anything, and it doesn't really have to mean that they're great at drawing. You know, they just have to want to learn. Yeah, you know, I'm definitely not really into people saying, I think this is the way it should be. It's kind of like, and not that I don't see relevance in some of the opinions that people have, but I was told coming up that, you know, I needed to have an apprenticeship and I needed to do this and I needed to do that. And the majority of the time that I was getting that advice was from people who were either, you know, just weren't great artists themselves. So, you know, of course they're trying to figure out ways of, you know, keeping people out or keeping competition out, you know. It's like hating kids, you know, like you were a kid once, so why would you hate kids? It's like, of course you can realize that maybe the kids don't know as much as you do and maybe need some guidance, but to hate them is just, it's weird. You know, and I think there's sometimes I catch myself like, I don't know if I'd call it hating, but there's sometimes where I'm like, oh, maybe, you know, I feel like I deserve that thing that other person's getting or something like that. Why are they getting that? And I think you just have to, have you ever heard of ants? It's like automatic negative thoughts. So it's like, you know, I think we all have those ants, they call them, where you're just automatically thinking about, you know, something negative. And I think the thing that keeps, you know, that puts some people above others, in my opinion, are the ones who can notice that they're having those thoughts and kind of push in a different direction. But it's interesting because I've also taken a full swing on that as well, where it's like I am 100% like when I started teaching people how to tattoo or I opened a shop, I was like, I'm not gonna haze people, or I don't feel like you have to be mean to people for them to learn. But then I started, I opened my shop and not that I think you should abuse people, but I think that, sometimes if you're too nice to them, then they don't respect you at the level that is probably necessary for them to really digest what it is you're saying.
Jesse, what are you doing now?
Right now, I'm just kind of running through and doing all the detail work. I'm pretty comfortable with where things are. So I'm just kind of, getting down the final details. I probably, after this layer, will feel confident enough to tattoo it. And then even past that point, while I'm tattooing it, I'll even make some adjustments on the skin while I'm at it. Like a lot of the texturing and stuff like that, I just do that once I start tattooing. But I still haven't gotten everything figured out where I'm going with it. There's still a few things where I'm just not totally happy with it. But I'll keep on crunching along until I am.
What does that mean when you say you're not happy with something?
It's just, I feel like I could take it further. Or I feel like, like I'd said before, sometimes I feel like when I'm drawing, I'm always like, oh, well, if I draw it this way, then it'll look good. But my goal, even though it may not look like it, my goal is always to try to introduce something new to every piece that I do. And I'm not always successful with it, but that's the goal. So if I don't feel like I'm achieving that, then there's typically a struggle in my nugget.
What do you think about tattoo artists using AI?
Oh, geez.
Swing for the fences on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an issue with it, to be honest. I understand why people have an issue with it, and I'm not. I don't think they're stupid for having that opinion. But I also am a person who, if I see a problem and there's no solution, then I don't focus on that problem. And there is no solution as far as I can tell when it comes to AI. It's coming, or it's here, and it's going to continue to get worse and worse, or better and better, depending on how you look at it. And so I've actually told a couple of my artists who are more reproductive artists, they're not like illustrators. I've said, this is probably a better way to build a reference. Someone who's more of a reproductive artist, that actually is more than they were doing before. They're actually involved in the creative process, versus if they're just looking up references and smashing them together.
How do you pick your color palettes, Jesse?
I only use 5 colors in black and white. So I guess I just kind of, I don't know. I just kind of roll with it.
Really?
Yeah.
What colors do you use?
If you'd like to learn, you can go to my seminar. It's going to be at the Summer Symposium, June 28th through the 30th. Oh, okay. You should get your tickets. There's only 45 left. I use concentrate blue, concentrate green, concentrate purple, red, and yellow. Yeah.
That's it?
That's it. Well, I use black and white as well, but those are only colors I use.
Concentrate?
Yeah, I use the concentrates. And I'll teach this at my seminar too, but the reason I chose to limit my palette to that was because I was trying to do these light fast tests on inks, and I started realizing that orange among others, but orange being the worst, doesn't hold up over time. And so what I did is I ended up putting all these colors in light fast tests, and I was like, you know what, I need to figure out what the base colors are, And when I figured out what the base colors are, there's like 14 base colors, and this is Eternal ink. There's 14 base colors in Eternal ink, and out of those 14 base colors, only really like 5 or 7 of them are able to be like tattooed. Like magenta is just very, I mean, are you using Eternal?
Yeah.
So you know, you've used magenta, it's not super easy to put in the skin.
Yeah.
And then you've got, of course, orange that doesn't hold up. The brown doesn't really hold up well. And then they have a lot of mixing inks. And those mixing inks are just weird viscosities. So like, they just don't go in well. So I just ended up narrowing it down to those colors because those were the ones that held up over time, and and I could make all the colors I needed to make with it. So. And this is what I teach in my seminar is you may not use those colors directly, but indirectly you might be using them and you don't know it because they use those colors to mix in. Like, so for example, let's say they're trying to make a murky blue. Well, they might put in orange in that blue to make that murky blue. And so then over time, that murky blue turns into a full-on blue without the orange in it. So what I would do next is I would basically get a liner out and I would just plow through this thing as quick as possible just to get the basic structure of what I've drawn. And then I actually go in with, I learned this lesson from Chet Zar. And he basically said, find the brush that you feel most comfortable with and go one size bigger. And so I do that with my needles is, let's say if I feel like I could do a lot of this with a 14 mag, then I'll go up to a 23 mag. And then I just go in and just start plowing in all those big shapes. And then I slowly start working my way backwards. I'll go into a 14 and then 11 and then a 7. And then I come back with the liners and start, really carving things out. But in doing that for as long as I've been doing it, I mean, I could probably complete this entire tattoo with a 14 mag and not need to even pull a liner out. But of course I do, but just having that ability to do that, I think helps out. And I also think if you want to create long fades, you need to use bigger brushes, you need to use bigger needles. And I found that when I was using like 7 mag for everything at the beginning, I'd end up getting whittling into these little shapes that just didn't matter. And I end up like having to just plow over it afterwards. So that's it. I don't know what it is. It's like
It's sick.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Where's the dick?
Well,
I think it got hidden in the eye, maybe, or
definitely
somewhere in here.
it's hidden in his mouth, where it should be. But yeah, so there's my sketch. Hope you guys learned something.